All right, folks, it is 7 o'clock and Ms. Doyle is with us. We are missing one of our members. Eric is not here. But I think we have everyone else. And so I'm sure we all have other lovely things we'd like to do. And as I said, Jamie's here. So let's call the meeting to order at 7:01. Item 2 on the agenda is approval of, it says May, that is incorrect. Thank you, Joe, as usual. It is June 24th, 2020 minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Joe. Second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Colleen. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried and approved. Moving right along to PFM's report comparison, the RFP results, however you want to phrase it. I know, Jamie, you did a presentation last night to the Board of Supervisors. I was not in attendance. I didn't watch. I don't know if any of the rest of the committee did or not, but
I watched it. Jamie did a terrific job. She summarized it very well, and she did some preemptive strikes in saying there are 2 banks that did not respond to the request for quotes, and she followed up with them because there were banks that the township uses and mentioned, and they both decided not to participate because of business model issues. So she was succinct to the point, and I loved it.
So Joe, do you have anything to add, Jamie, or is that good enough for the report?
I can hit the highlights if you'd like me to. Do you each have a copy in front of you?
No, I certainly want you to, and I was just
Okay.
kidding, but I'm very glad that Joe listened. But anyway, yes, please take us through it.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be participating virtually this evening, and I will keep this short and sweet, and I apologize to those of you that are listening to this for the second time, although I do think I have 2 small pieces of new information since the meeting last night that have developed over the course of today. So page 1 of my handout, we're at all-time low interest rates, which is great for this transaction. I won't belabor that. Page 2 is a summary of the bank loan proposals that we received from 7 different banks. And I've highlighted the 3 that we evaluated to demonstrate the range of proposals that were received. First and foremost, in that top box, you got 4 proposals for a fixed rate for the entire 25 years. And the best proposal in that category came from People's Security Bank. They proposed a 2.39% fixed rate for the entire 25 years. And that all-in borrowing rate just includes their bank fee that they've proposed as well. Prepayment at any time with no penalty is agreeable to them, and that was the biggest term and condition. There certainly are other terms and conditions that we detailed in our RFP, and they've agreed to all of them. For those of you that are scratching your head and saying, who's People's Security Bank? They bought Penn Security Bank, and they have a location at 325 South Main Street in Doylestown that they just opened right before the governor's stay-at-home order. I believe they're working on getting their drive-through service up and running as we speak. They have a lobby, which of course no one's allowed in at the moment without appointments, but they are right there on Main Street in Doylestown.
Yeah.
To sort of make this page go faster to get to the important page, the supervisors agreed last night to pursue the People's Security proposal at the 2.39% contingent upon the Ways and Means Committee review this evening and assuming that you concur, because that's the best proposal on this page and that eliminates 100% of your interest rate risk and provides you with the greatest amount of flexibility going forward. Whether that flexibility means wrapping this into a future bigger bond issue if it makes economic sense, or whether that future decision means, you know, if rates go up or if you didn't do another project, it might mean, you know, that you keep this 2.39% for the whole 25 years possibly. I would think you'd refinance sometime in that period, but it's your option and your option alone if you ever want to give up the 2.39%. Going to skip to the next page. That's where I got a little bit of color on what I would have considered the best proposals received. And so you can see that. And as was mentioned, TD and Provident Bank did not submit proposals, and we called them. And it was a business decision on their part in that they did not want to provide a cap rate. They did not want to take on the interest rate risk that's inherent in a transaction this long. And, you know, I nicely explained to them that we were not trying to be difficult, but this is state law. This is the Local Government Unit Debt Act. The state does not allow you as the issuer to take on that long-term interest rate risk. So they said, thanks for the opportunity. Page 4 is the most important page in here, where I tried to really quantify and boil down to the dollar the 3 highlighted proposals and compare it to a bond issue. And if you look at the bottom line, the People's Security Bank in option 1, column 1, is the lowest cost over the life. For option 2 and 3, we had to assume the cap rate. So for example, option 2 was First National Bank. I picked that one to illustrate because they had the lowest rate for the shortest period of time, a 1.10% for 5 years, and then a cap rate for years 6 through 25 goes into the assumptions to generate the numbers down below in column 7. In option 3, QNB, I picked that one because they had the lowest fixed rate for the longest period of time, a 2.25 for 15 years, and then a cap rate of 4% for years 16 through 25. And really the QNB proposal would have come in second place if you look at the very bottom line cost. And then finally, we compared it to a bond issue, and a bond issue would have come in third place in this analysis. And this is comprehensive. You'll see there's an estimated cost of issuance line in the top box. So each of these are sized for that estimated cost of issuance. So that's all in there when you look at that bottom line debt service over the life. Again, assuming the cap rate in options 2 and 3, because we don't really know where those rates would reset for those years. And so page 5 was the sample motion presented to the supervisors last night. They agreed to proceed with the fixed rate People's proposal contingent on your agreement this evening. And the timeline on page 5 is such that we can come back to your voting meeting on August 18th with the legal debt incurring ordinance, and that would allow for settlement on September 22nd. People's is agreeable to that timeline because that is a little bit longer than we had originally anticipated the timeline to be. And that's a function of your former bond counsel changed firms and is no longer doing this type of work. So we would not have been in a position to bring that paperwork last night, even if a decision had been determined on which bank to go with ahead of time. But the 2 new pieces of information as of today, in further discussions with People's, and they understand that this is all contingent upon the outcome of this meeting this evening, but they have agreed to allow Jeff Garton to give the tax exempt opinion, which will save you a little bit of money. I was pleasantly surprised by that, so that's good news. And so we don't have to do a competitive RFP process to select a note counsel. Jeff will be able to serve in that capacity. And the other thing, and this is kind of in the weeds a little bit, but I figured it didn't hurt to ask the question. It was not part of our term sheet, but I asked People's today, that the gentleman's name is Ken Keller at People's. I asked him if they would be willing to make this a drawdown facility. And what that means, and you don't have to take it if you don't want it, but I just wanted to ask the question and give you the option. What that means is you could draw down on the loan as you were spending it, and that'd save you a little bit of interest too, because you only start paying on it as you draw on it. And so they agreed that if you wanted it, they would agree to a 9-month drawdown period. If you didn't draw it all down by the end of month 9, you'd have to take the rest of it at that time. The drawdown period would end at the end of 9 months. And I don't know, maybe that's more trouble than it's worth to do the draws with the bank, but it would save you a little bit of interest to have that option. And we just have to know for that to go into the documents if you were interested in that or not. So those were the two new things I learned just since last night. The rest of the pages, there's 41 pages here. The rest of the pages are the backup schedules for the analysis that we just went over, as well as all of the actual RFP responses. So I would be happy to entertain any questions that you may have at this time.
Brenda, hearing no questions, then I'd like to make a motion that we notify the Board of Supervisors that we concur with their recommendation for Peoples.
I absolutely agree. Is there a second to the motion?
A second.
Everybody in agreement?
Do
Say
Yeah,
aye.
me.
you think we should discuss it a little bit? There are alternatives.
Such
Unless we-
as,
What?
Go
Well,
ahead.
I was thinking the Quakertown is a little different. It's 15 years at a lower fixed, and if we're going to use it for 15 years, it's going to be, after 15 years, it's probably going to save us about $120,000. And then at that point, it reverts, and the first people becomes cheaper. But it's how long do we expect to borrow the money? It was one of the aspects, and because I don't know how we went from 15 to 25. I missed that, but 15 years, I think is sufficient to cover this thing. And do we need to go 25? And you guys may have discussed that and I missed it, but I don't know how we got to
Add a
25.
little bit of color to your point. All of these proposals are for a 25-year amortization. So the QNB Bank fixed rate is only for the first 15 years, and then it would become a variable rate based on a formula each year thereafter, so years 16 through 25. And the cap is 4% on that loan for years 16 through 25. So they're not different terms, it's just a different fixed rate period.
No, I'm not saying the proposals are different. Our discussion, how did we get to 25-year loan? I wasn't part of that, so I don't know.
that's what the Board of Supervisors has wanted all along, is a
So they
20.
want 25. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that was at the
And-
budget work sessions discussion.
Yeah, we've had plenty of
And the
discussions, Mike,
recommendations.
because I think some of us on Ways and Means would prefer to see less than that.
Yeah,
But
because
that,
a 25-year loan generally has more interest payout than a 15-year loan.
of course it does.
Yeah,
Or a 20-year, I mean,
Any number you pick, right.
yeah.
So is there a need for this to be 25 years? I know it sounds like they decided, but is there a need for this to be a 25-year loan?
That would be going back and recreating the wheel. We
All
had
right,
that.
I missed all that stuff then, I guess.
Well, no,
Yeah.
Michael, it's a good point, but even when we did the first borrowing for, what was it, the 10 million?
We were discussing, yes.
approximately,
Mhm. That was-
there was a lot of discussion at that point in time of how long it should be. Certainly 20 was kind of Ways and Means, but the
It's a
board-
$10 million loan. I see the longer term. The fact that this is a smaller number, the necessity of a longer term makes less sense to me.
You can always revisit that if, in a couple of years or whenever you deem necessary. If you do wrap this into something else, you can shorten the term at that point in time if you'd like.
The one thing I picked up last night is there is no prepayment penalty
That-
on this.
that
So
was
if,
gonna be my next
if
one.
in the
Mhm.
townships, in coffers, let's say they're, COVID goes well, there's a get well, and they decide to, pay it down on a more accelerated basis, they can without penalty. So, and I think the discussions we've had was we wanted to lock in the rate, and everyone, I think it was a consensus, felt more comfortable with the longer the lock, the better. And at 25, it's a max lock. So yeah, you're paying a little bit more in interest, but I think we get the flexibility that we need. It's an attractive rate. There is no prepayment penalty, and it's in we have control of the facility.
I think in all
I think the
proposals, you have
sweetener
control.
also is, if we
It
don't
looks
have, if there is a drawdown, we don't need to take the 3 million right away. Maybe Ed can chime in on this, that maybe to pay the building is needed right now, the 1.6 million. And then the other 1.4 can maybe be stretched out to, and I'm not saying every month, but stretched out, let's say 6 months or 9 months from now.
The second piece of it that you're
Yes.
discussing is tied to the Pebble Ridge Woodridge project. So as fast as that goes and we start doing curbs, yeah, there's some logic to that. Does this drawdown facility cost us anything?
No. And to your point, Mike, you know, if things go really well and you do have extra money and you want to pay down in part some of it, you know, we do that with our clients all the time, and we can basically tell the bank that we want to pay off the longest maturities, and in conjunction with that, a lot of times we can do a rate renegotiation at that point in time, because, you know, if you pay off the last 5 years, you want the 20-year rate, assuming that the market conditions are such at the time that it's better than the 239. So this does give you a lot of flexibility. I mean, your hands really aren't tied on any front.
The only difference I see is for the first 15 years, it's about $100,000 difference in interest between Quakertown and this First Peoples. And I think they both give you the same amount of flexibility. And the other one gives you $100,000 more.
Well, they don't give you, well, Jamie, explain why they aren't equal in flexibility.
Well, if you look at page 4, you can see the payments for the first 15 years. Let's look at it. So it's about $168,000 a year on average for the Peoples, and it's about $170,000 a year on the QNB.
And I have to tell you, Mike, at first when I was looking at this, because I'm far more familiar with QNB being, you know, around, and I didn't know anything about People's Security, I was, you know, impressed with what they were doing. But
I've worked with the past with Ken Keller. He's a very good guy.
Okay.
He's a stand-up guy. I worked with him when he was at Univest Bank, and he bounced around a couple of banks in the interim. I see that he found another home. But he's a good guy, so we're working with a good guy there. You know, yeah, my question is the 15 versus 25. And if there's a need for 25, then by all means you go with Ken Keller.
I think there's some of the other points that really don't involve Jamie at this time, but other tension or other, you know, we've got 3 people from the Pension Advisory Committee, and there's the pension piece that we want to talk about as well. So not necessarily tonight, but I don't know. I've not seen anything like this. Bob, Colleen, anyone else in the group seen any long-term debt? Eric?
Well, I'm not jumping on that point just yet. I'm more thinking of, I think once this thing sails from the harbor, nobody's going to think about it again. And I think we'd look like a bad group if 15 years from now we didn't pay this off and the rates shifted up to that 4% number versus us setting it sail and everybody's saying, oh, we're just going to make the debt service and 15 or 25. If they can do the payments in 15, great. But I think setting it sail with everybody's mindset being it's off in 25, there's no change in payments, then I think we'd look a whole lot better off for the group.
I don't think that, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I'm certainly not thinking about that. There's the community rec center that might be out there. As Jamie also mentioned, there'd be a chance to perhaps roll this together down the line. I mean, so, and I know that, go ahead, Bob.
No, I think it's normal for a government entity to look at their outstanding debt and the interest rates that they're paying. I think that Jamie's business might be 50% refinancings. I don't know what the number is, but I've done a lot of refinancings because you look at your debt service and what interest rate you're paying every year when you're doing your budget versus what's out there. So,
Yes, and I monitor your debt portfolio at all times, even when you don't see me or hear from me. You know, you're in our database, you're our client, and we monitor for refinancing opportunities. So, you know, your bond issue from 2017, that has a 5-year call date. So May of 2022 is the call date on those bonds. And, you know, we monitor it. And if it makes sense, we'll be in touch a good 6 months before that call date to talk to you about it, to see if it makes sense from your standpoint and to plan for a refinancing.
And I don't want to
Again,
muddy
if
the
it makes
waters,
sense.
but, you know, if that may wrap around some other debt if
It may.
that happens.
Mhm.
So, you know,
Timing's
that-
right.
good conversation, discussion. Anything else? So I think it is appropriate now, and thank you for slowing me down, Mike. I will say, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? The motion carries unanimously among the Ways and Means Committee. Stephanie, what do we need to do, if anything?
There's nothing to, your minutes will be shared with the Board of Supervisors, and who, I'm assuming Bob's taking minutes, or?
He
Yeah.
is,
Wasn't-
I can
okay.
tell by the
Yeah,
look on his
Um,
face.
I can tell the look on his face.
I made a
But-
bad deal, Steph.
Your minutes will
Really
be, your minutes will be shared with the board, so they'll know that you've made that recommendation. I'm sure they'll appreciate.
Hey, Bob,
your
when we were
concurrence.
both newbies on this committee, we were handed the minutes and said, this is your new job. Time
Well,
to
we'll
pass the
talk about
church.
that later. We'll talk about that
Okay.
later, Joe. Since Jamie spent quite a bit of time last night and is here, are there any other questions for her? And if not, you can hang around Jamie if you so like, or you can say good evening and whatever you want to do. But we were just going to move forward. And one of the things that's already been highlighted, I put it on the agenda, was, and I didn't know when the agenda was made, we're expecting Board of Supervisors approval on August the 18th, and then follow up with a close around sometime on September the 22nd. I don't know that there needs to be anything else said on that particular point.
Go, man,
Question?
go.
Huh?
Go, man, go.
Oh, go man, go, okay. I'm hoping the next point on the agenda is pretty brief. Status of the 2019 audit, has it been finalized? Can it be shared?
No, it hasn't been finalized yet. I got a preliminary copy from the auditors, and I'm currently reviewing it. I have to mark up the MD&A, and we got the final audit adjustments, and they totaled a little over $26,000. It didn't have any effect on the P&L. It was all a reclassification on the balance sheet from from accounts receivable to taxes receivable. And so after I review it and mark up the MD&A, I'll get a hold of them and we'll set up a date as far as an exit interview, and I'll be sending out an invite to everybody.
Thanks. What, do you have any idea? I mean, I'm not trying to, within the next month, 2 weeks.
Well, let's see. It depends on the auditor's schedule. I'm taking some time off the 5th, 6th, and 7th, so the 8th, 9th, I would say that probably the week of the 10th, August 10th. And it depends on everybody else's schedule as far as when they can, attend the exit interview.
There's no group that you have to file with by a date certain. I mean, in my previous life, if you didn't have everything filed with Emma, the electronic monitoring, you would receive nasty grams from
When
the and other places.
the procedure is that what I do is after the exit interview, I send out that, I send the financial statements to PFM, TD Bank, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and there's a couple others that I send the financial statements out to.
Okay.
And, just to keep them, up to date and in the loop as far as what the financial position of the township is of 12/31/19. But I do send it out after the exit interview to 6 or 7 entities.
And then there's this very surveillance call usually with Moody's. When is that? Is that September, October? We never really went over last year's because COVID got in the way.
There is always a compliance procedure that I have to meet in September. If Jamie's still in the Zoom, I can't remember exactly the name of the entity that I have to do the compliance, but usually Jamie and Melissa hold my hand and they send me out the information to submit to the entity, making sure that we're in compliance.
Yes, we help with your EMMA filing, I think is probably
you.
the acronym you're looking for. And,
Yes.
Separate from that, if the rating agency does reach out to you for their annual compliance review, please let us know, because sometimes they don't copy us on that. But,
Okay.
we can be helpful in that. Sometimes they just email you some questions and sometimes they want to have an actual call.
Yeah, that's not a problem. Like I said, I always email them our financial statements every year. Like I said, to 6 or 7 entities, including PFM.
Well, that was what I was talking about earlier, Emma, but
Okay.
it has to be done within 6 months of the year end primarily. But anyway, okay, so we're moving along and it'll be done in time for the next.
As soon as I'm done reviewing it and marking up the MD&A, I'll set up a time and date and I'll
Yep,
send out
I
the
hear
invite to everybody.
Good, thanks.
Yep.
Ken, you don't write the MD&A?
Do I write the MD&A?
Yeah.
I just add commentary at the end. Usually it's a boilerplate type of
Yeah.
report right now. I attended the PICPA local government conference, and that's going to be changing, I think for 21, in which the entity will have to write up the MD&A. But right now it's boilerplate. All the numbers go into specific areas, and like I said, I write up the end of the MD&A.
Okay.
That's different. Okay. Thanks for
I come
that.
from the SEC world where I wrote it and you had 2 other entities looking over your shoulder, which was the attorneys and the CPAs. So
Right. In my
yeah.
once upon a time in my previous life, I had to write up the MD&A, and
Yeah.
but when I got here to Doylestown Township, it was basically, and they're just following GASB rules, that the MD&A became like a boilerplate type of document in which the numbers would flow into it, and then I would add color at the end as far as what's coming up in 2020 and things like that.
Okay. All right.
Well, then let's talk about the exciting stuff now that 6 months of 2020 is over. Ken and Ed, what's new? What's different? How are the results coming in I know it's really too soon for EIT because it was just filed, but people may have filed early. So.
No, I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
I mean,
I did.
just so you know, we are partway through department head first round interviews. We're not finished. I don't have a completed report, which is why you don't have one. But we're working our way through the departments. A majority of the admin side has not been completed yet, and we haven't done parks yet. So there's still big chunks that are left to go. And out of all this, at least so far, there's been no huge surprises. Yes, EIT is off. As I remember right, Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, we're off over 12% year to year at this.
It's a little.
But we're actually more because we forecast it to go up 1.5% year to year.
Right.
So we're basically 13.5% off budget. And at least as a stalking horse for now, what we've put in for this first round, we've got a 10% reduction on the full year. We won't really know till we get into August and the second quarter deadline comes to an end. But correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, we don't have any big receipts from there. I would say the only thing that's really offsetting any of that is we've had excellent building permit input from the likes of Doylestown Hospital and the Tabor property. They've really come through very strongly in these first 6 months. And I mean, to the tune of $400,000, $500,000 worth of stuff. So that's a very big number that has helped us. So again, we're still working our way through it. I don't have the answers at this point, and we're getting there. And I'll remind you that the process is first review in July, a second review of the same elements in August, which is with a month more of data. And it's at that point that we reach out and start to make the estimate for 21. We've had some preliminary discussions along the way on that, but we're not focused on 21 yet.
And I'm wondering if I could ask a question on the building permits, and maybe Steph is really the one to ask. There's the Toll Brothers 130 townhouse development that I think you had mentioned would not begin, but the process would continue in September. Is that normally then the building permits would be in this fiscal year or next fiscal year?
Would be next, we would anticipate them in next fiscal year.
Okay, thank
Because they have site work to do and the site work always starts first.
you. Okay.
Brenda, if I could just add some color.
Please.
As of July 22nd, we've received one EIT payment for $49,500. And I was taking a look at the report, and most of the money was for the 5th quarter of 2019. We only received $4,800 for the 1st quarter of 2020 and $10,800 for the 2nd quarter. Now, what they do is they send me out a report telling me what they're going to deposit into our account, and they break it out by quarters. And, you know, like I said, most of the money is for the 5th quarter, which is going back, of course, earlier to this year. And like Ed said, you know, I ran an income statement, and as of today, we're 11.4% off compared year to date from last year. So if you add in that, you know, what was the 1.25% that we, you know, prescribed as far as growth is concerned, our building permits are way up. So far, year to date, we've received $402,000 as of date, whereas last year we received $76,000 to this date. And
And can you go back to the EIT? What's the shortfall with a dollar sign in front of it, not a percentage?
$203,000.
How much?
$203,000.
Okay. So all other things being equal at a department level, assuming there's no variance, there should not be a significant cash flow issue, given that there's 325 plus on the plus side from permits and a negative 200,000 in EIT. Year to date.
You are correct as of today.
Year to date.
Because what's carrying the day is the building permits and our reallocation of the millage to the general fund, because we received, you know, year to date $123,000 more than versus last year because of the reallocation of the millage. But the thing is that, you know, moving forward, we're keeping an eye on EIT as far as that is concerned, because it's been awfully quiet.
And there's some
I've sent-
40+% that we receive in the latter part of the year of the EIT revenue for this year. So it's still a matter of when people get back to work or if they are still at work, and we really won't know till August.
And I
Well,
haven't heard anything about the second quarter being pushed out. So basically, the second quarter is due July 31st. So I don't know if people are waiting to file their first and second quarter together or their estimated tax payments. You know, it's hard to judge. And basically, because of the COVID-19, the folks at Keystone are a little difficult to get a hold of. You know, I send emails and, you know, they take a couple of days to get back with me. So,
well, that's one of the reasons why I attached that research brief, because it has a lot of percentages in it. And we can take a look at that in a few minutes. Transfer tax. The real estate market's really interesting around, and Eric, you probably know more, although maybe it's just residential real estate that seems to be a seller's market. Any transfer tax coming through, or is the county holding on to all of that like they sometimes do?
well, we've been getting our transfer taxes right along. It looks like we're 5% off from last year.
Right.
Because we're down about $14,000. That's it. But, you know, the bottom hasn't fallen out on the transfer tax situation yet.
No, I really don't think it's going to. I mean,
Okay.
several people in our neighborhood have moved, as I said, and I just know a lot of people were real estate moving favorably. So 5%.
Real estate tax seems to be solid. I'm sure.
Well, the real estate tax, but I was talking about the transfer
I
tax.
understand. I understand.
Yeah. Is there anything to report, Ed, on the real estate tax? Is it all, is a percentage of collection pretty consistent with previous years?
We're at, let's see. Yeah, well, actually, it was 1% better. This time last year, we were at 94%. This year, we're at 96, 95. But we only have a little bit to go.
Right.
I'm still getting small amounts, you know, $5,000, $10,000.
We had, and one of the reasons we're a little higher this year, I think we had some past year tax returns. Isn't that right, Ken?
Mm-hmm.
It's not in the main account, it's in the sub account.
I didn't understand that.
Payments from past years. You know, delinquent payments that
Oh,
collections past periods.
Year-end adjustment, you know, as far as what we received in the current year, as far as you know, it's related to the previous year's taxes. But delinquents, you know, we've received about $32,000 in delinquent taxes to date. I think that's
a fair amount more than last year. I don't remember the number, but
yeah, for the general fund, the delinquent tax is up about $4,800. So, you know, that's the reallocation.
but it's spread.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good enough for $4,800. Anything else on revenue, or which I wouldn't think so. I think we probably have covered that. But as far as expenditures are concerned, closing down the township, any savings on salaries, those type of expenditures?
Yes, because there's some employees that left that had not been replaced at this point. So there's some small savings that are there, and we have definitely, well, okay, in the spending side, yes.
Yes, that's what I was talking about. And you had told us about not replacing the positions, so that's nothing.
But those positions will be filled eventually, correct? Or are we?
Yeah, they need to be. They need to be. They're in the police department, they're in public works, they're in administration, yeah. And everybody's picking up the slack and getting a little grumpy about it. So,
Yeah.
you know,
They have jobs.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I did include the COVID-19 impact on local revenues, just to give us, does PFAT do anything, do this type of studies, Stephanie, or?
Well, I looked at the paper and the paper gets it to the county level and kind of stops. And when I tried to match that paper to what our experience was in 2008, 9, and 10, it doesn't match. I mean, we specifically went back and pulled those financial reports. I'm now speaking about EIT. And we have year to year, you've seen those graphs and curves before. They show us in that particular sequence of years 8, 9, and 10, I believe it's -6 in the first year and a further -5 in the second year. And then a recovery of about 12% up in the third year. And I can't get that kind of numbers out of the paper you sent out. I'm not sure why, but there's nothing.
Well, one of the reasons why, Ed, is because the research brief is done on a county-wide level. And of course, every municipality, I mean, we're looking at, you know, Doylestown Township where you're doing that. I assume you weren't trying to back into the county figures at all. But just trying to look, I wouldn't think so.
I was
but,
looking for the same pattern and I didn't see it.
okay.
But then within a county, I mean, there's such diversity. Like, for example, I got Ben Salem with the casino, a gazillion people on the police force. You know, then you got to go a couple miles down the street to Bristol, and you've got a whole different demographics. You turn around and go north 10 miles, and you're in God's country again. You know, with covered bridges, etc. You know, so.
Well, where it got me was that I tended to think it's more our history, our historic experience is more relevant than what the figures the paper had. That's.
Well, but they pulled those numbers from historical experience too.
I understand.
So, you know, but looking at it from the state level. And I still would like to know if PSATS does anything similar. I mean, having worked in school districts for a long time, the Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials has done a lot of research, which isn't, you know, applicable to the municipalities necessary. But have you, Stephanie, do they do, or Ken?
yeah, they haven't put out anything like this. I mean, they've done seminars on municipalities and preparing for where the
Right.
downturns are coming from. And how best to, you know, prepare and do your, you know, look at stuff and everything like that. I'd put that more in like the training awareness category, but I haven't seen them publish anything yet, you know, so, you know, if anything, they'll put articles in the, you know, their magazine and stuff like that.
Okay, so not really a think tank type of
No,
situation.
no. They're more of a policy, education, training, and they, I don't know what the word is, but they push legislation that, you know, positively impacts local governments with the state legislature.
Well, sometimes it's just, I like to look at multiple
Sure.
sources, and it'll be interesting to see how EIT truly shakes out. I know this meeting's too close. August will be a lot better to discuss it. And we don't have a meeting with the Board of Supervisors until September, correct, for budget?
Correct.
So there'll be a lot. I mean, real estate tax will be finalized by that point, certainly. Transfer tax will have a better idea if it's just a blip right now or if it is as good, because of the all-time, you know, the lows, the mortgage, the borrowing makes it quite attractive to, and I'm sure, at least based on some people looking at a home I'm familiar with, people want to get out of Philadelphia and out of New York, so some of them do. Anything else on this, Bob?
No.
I think, okay. Moving along to Community Rec Center. I'm not sure, Stephanie, if you copied everybody. Dave, would you kind of fill us in about where we are? I thought my timeline was off. I don't know why, but it was.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. So the RFP and the RFQ. So the RFP for the architectural / engineering services for the building is, and the RFQ for the owner's rep services. They've both been out on the street for since July 1st. They were posted up on PennBid. Have a lot of activity, a lot of people looking at it. It's generated a lot of interest. We just had, because of Governor Wolf's restrictions, we just had a pre-proposal meeting online with potential proposers last Monday, or this past Monday. Feels like a lot longer than that, but past Monday, and went through and answered questions and things like that. So right now we're in the waiting game of people preparing their proposals for submission. Proposals are due for both of them on August 4th. I anticipate, based on our schedule, that we would go to the board, open those proposals on August 4th. We would review those proposals and create a short list that week, the first week of August. Second week of August, we'd have interviews for the architectural piece, and we would prepare a recommendation to go to the board for the 18th. The RFQ piece, the owner's rep, is not as critical to get that started right away. Same due date. We look to probably do a short list toward the end of August, early September, to get to a recommendation to the board in September, on September 15th. So that's the schedule right now on those two. Just kind of a waiting game for people to put together their proposals.
Can you give us an idea? I know you posted it on PennBuild. How many, I don't know what you call it, takedowns or?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, honestly, it went out to a lot. PennBid has, so you could have a firm with multiple people register under that firm. So, it went out to like almost a couple thousand people received it. Probably about 100 and some downloads for, roughly for both of them. I think on the architectural piece, we had 50 some attendees. There were some duplicates of people who were on that same company. And on the owner's rep piece, probably had about 26 attendees on that call. I anticipate, we could see, 5 to 10 proposals, maybe more for the architectural. And I think on the construction management owner's rep side, we'll see 4 or 5, might be a little more shocked to see and get some more, but certainly we'll get some, some good action on it, I think. So, but certainly PennBid it's been a good thing to use PennBid because it gets a lot of attention. Actually, for some reason, a firm in LA actually grabbed a hold of it and was looking to team with somebody actually here. So it's not like, I don't know why, but look, work is work. And in this day and age, you can be on this side of the country or across the world and be doing engineering and design. So.
Believe me, I'm familiar with that. I see that.
Yeah. So it looks positive. So we'll be, we're answering questions and doing the minutes and trying to get to, to the 4th.
Okay, so you basically answered the second. The anticipated Board of Supervisors action is the same night as borrowing, or the bank note, I should put it.
Correct. For the RFP, for the architectural piece of it. Again, the owner's rep, just because of the fact that we're probably gonna have a lot, we're going to go through them and really try to get this. We wanted to do that first. The owner's rep can wait because really the feasibility study comes first.
Right.
Once if and when the board acts on it, feasibility starts, and really we don't need the owner's rep on board for the feasibility study. We'd like to see the owner's rep on board for when we start talking about conceptual design pieces to it and moving that forward. So that's the plan. That's the reason why.
Okay. And just Ed, going along with that, when is the Board of Supervisors budget meeting in September? Is that also the same day? Would
It
that-
is.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Stephanie. It would be before.
15th.
I think 3 and 5.
I'm sorry?
3 and 5.
Okay, so everybody, I didn't put that on the agenda. I will for the next time, but 3 o'clock on September the 15th. Any questions, comments on that? Moving right along, 2021 budget. I think, Ed, you already started really talking about that, and
That we don't really get going on that till next month. Right now, we're getting the 2020 figures together. And yes, we're talking about 21, but we're not recording anything at this point. So I don't have any commentary yet.
that's why I put it if applicable, but one of the things that obviously we'll have to be trying to figure out and looking at is what COVID will do to next year's revenues.
Right.
I'm just curious, we did hear from Park and Rec that there would be really no financial, no budget items really requested for next year. And thank you again, Stephanie, for facilitating that conversation with Kathy Brown via email. Are there any other committees putting forward major projects or anything?
Not that we know of. I mean, EAC has a small little budget that they use to do various projects and host educational forums and purchase replacement signs, whether it's in the native plant garden or someplace else. So they have those funds. We did share with all the department heads that liaison to various committees a request to make sure that they ask their board or committee they liaison to whether or not they have anything specific that they would like to put into the 21 budget, and to make sure that that information is transferred to Ed and Ken through the process. That we'd like to hear that when they meet in August with Ken and Ed. So I guess I'll throw that out to you guys. I don't know exactly whether that should be Ken or I asking that question of the Ways and Means, and whether or not you have any. So, let us know by August if you have any desires for expenditures in 21.
Well, one of the things that we have talked about before, of course, are the bathrooms at close to, and we've also talked about how those could be funded. So I don't know, it's not really on the agenda, although it could be called new business, but it really isn't, it's old business. Do we want to put together a request for that, a recommendation?
Or is that something you want to communicate with the park board on, perhaps? Because it falls into a park, I don't know. I'm thinking more something that's related to what you're doing, that enhances your work as Ways and Means Committee, things like that.
Suppose there was a study that you wanted to do, or you wanted
Oh,
to.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I don't think that there is anything like that. We've never talked about it. About the only thing we have discussed, I think, are the restrooms.
Let me throw something out because
Okay.
I listened last night to the meeting, and one topic that came up
How did you-
was lease. Well, this is a two-pronger. One was whether we would lease or buy some copiers. Okay. The first question is, was there a lease versus purchase analysis done? And I know Stephanie made a comment about technology for copiers, et cetera, turning over every 3 years or so. I'm not sure if the copier world is turning over that quickly. I've been making copies my entire life. But anyway, that's one thing is, are we doing the appropriate financial analyses before we present it to the Board of Supervisors? And the second question is, should we even be copying to begin with? I worked with a firm for 5 years, and at the end of 5 years consulting, my paper stack from them was maybe 2 inches tall, total, okay? We had meetings, we had Google Sheets, well, we interacted on the computer, we had meetings, everything was done on an 80-inch wide screen, sitting around a table. Everyone had access to the data. So, I guess is it time for some office automation type review, best practices, what's out there? I know, I'll speak for Ken, but the topic comes up about accounting packages. There always seems to be some angst about, this file and that file and general ledger numbers and this and that. And, is there some way that we can simplify the process so, Ed and Ken aren't burning, the candle at both ends to give us paper, as opposed to an electronic file that we can look at on our notepads. So, if I were, again, speaking for myself, is that something that we ought to be looking at? I know there's going to be a cost to do that work, but are we penny wise and pound foolish by not doing such a study? Comments?
That's something that we could look at for the future. As far as the copier companies that I talked to, and all 13 of them were talking about automation as far as paper is concerned. When I got here at Doylestown Township, there was a lot of desktop printers, inkjet printers, and it's a process that we're going to take a look at in the future. There is going to be a wide format copier printer that we're going to be leasing, and several of the departments are anxious to start using that piece of equipment. We are still using the copiers from administration to the police department to the finance and park and rec. These are copiers that these are pieces of equipment that we use.
Yeah, and we scan a lot of paperwork, but the key is I'm thinking about all the paperwork that comes into the building, and then we try to scan probably 95% everything that's coming in, and we use the copy machines to do that scanning.
I'm reacting to the question, which was, does Ways and Means think of anything that they might want to see? And that's
I think you're looking more.
Can I chime in for a second regarding what we've discussed this staff as one. I think this is important. Just real quick, I just want to interject. Obviously going paperless is important, and I try to do that as much as possible with the technology we have, which is the copiers and scanners. We get a lot of plans in and historical stuff. But the other thing that we need to think about is we need a document management system. I don't care what it looks like, but to be able to manage the amount of paperwork we have currently and to properly archive things and do it in accordance with the law, meaning we have to keep digital copies, and how we do that and how we keep what paper copies we need to keep because of the law. How do we do that? And I think a document management system would be beneficial, and it's something that we should investigate. Now, I know that's been talked about many, many times. I think and many times it's been moved off the budget because of costs. But that's something that maybe, Joe and Bob, and you have, when I came from, Pannoni in the consulting world, and other firms that I worked with, I've seen document management systems back in the early 90s and before that. That kind of thing. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
Dave, I think that Joe mentioned one example, but I think what he's really getting at, Joe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is more of a office review, how things are done and processed, and somebody coming in from the outside and taking a look at the operation, and
that's fine too. Yeah,
how we're doing things, and coming up with a recommendation, not just for copiers, but
purchasing
software,
financial software,
everything.
Yeah,
and it's pretty common to have it done.
Well, it certainly is, based on past experience, my past experience. Is there anyone with expertise from municipalities? Stephanie, Ken, anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's companies out there that, you know, we can look into to find, but that would be money that we would want, you know, that sort of a recommendation from Ways and Means that we would hire that type of firm, and, you know, we can all kind of go and research and try to find a company that does that and specifically focuses on municipalities, because we are somewhat unique in terms of the documentation and, you know, records retention and things like that, just as one example. And so, yeah, I mean, and then figure out what something like that might cost. And
Stephanie, you can reach out to our sister boroughs and townships and
Oh, yeah,
find out if they're
absolutely.
using something like that.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
put Jamie Doyle on the spot and ask her if she's familiar, since she deals with so many municipalities, that she may be aware of something or have some contacts of people who do that. So,
Jamie, are you still there?
well, we'll have to get to Jamie.
Yeah, she may have stepped away.
She's mute, her mic is
She's mute
muted,
and
so,
her photo's gone, so.
okay.
Yeah.
But she hasn't logged out. But I think
No.
that's a good idea, Bob. I mean, there's what, 2,500 municipalities in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, so there probably are. There have to be. Okay, so I guess we can do some independent research and that type of thing. Do we want to, put it off for a month? I guess we would have time to do some
Oh,
research.
yeah,
and-
you have time. It would,
Yeah.
you know.
Ed, you're on, Ed, you're
I don't like to be
trying
late
talk
for
and-
budget stuff.
I see Ed trying to talk and he's on mute.
You're on mute.
He's just,
Ed,
Ed, you're on mute.
Mute.
Unmute.
Ed.
I like it that way.
but whatever you said.
We
was
do
So do
too.
we.
probably
Read my
really
lips.
good.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Read my lips.
All I'm saying is,
Gonna read between the lines.
only a month. A month from now, you need to have done enough
Yes.
work to have written a description and estimated a cost.
Yeah, I think estimating the cost, you can get an idea from other municipalities what they paid. You wouldn't do it until next January.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
The Ways and Means Committee needs to put this together. This is
Okay.
your idea, cost it out.
Yeah, but the only thing, we could cost it out. I mean, you know, I've done these for
Yeah.
school districts, but
Yeah, I know.
but what you want to do is find somebody with municipal experience, and I think the people,
I completely understand that. So I were asking you to put the organizing information together so we can get it into the budget. I don't have time to investigate this idea at this point.
okay, but I'm saying your administrative staff have contacts with other municipalities who may have some people who have done it.
They may, but I don't.
So if they
I'm
share that with-
no administrative staff.
If
So
they share that with us, I'll be happy to talk to them if you want.
okay.
well, it sounds like Dave had mentioned he's experienced this as an idea and it wasn't successful because of cost. How,
Well,
like,
that can be
how-
probably, I
is that
think
something
Stephanie and
that-
Ken can speak to that more than I can. I just know that, you know, when I came on board, one of the things I started talking about was a little bit of this automation and going paperless. And I heard kind of a little bit over that it was cost prohibitive
Okay.
but that was a board decision. So again, the
Yeah.
board is different now than it was in
Sure.
the past.
And that,
So that's all.
and it's anecdotal then.
Yeah,
Mhm.
sure, but still, something should be. I think it's something that should be investigated with our historical stuff and our current stuff because it's only going to continue.
Well, who in terms of like a role within the township staff, would Dave as the director of operations oversee that type of project, or would Stephanie? I'm just curious in general. If you were to implement this kind of, bring in a consultant, you know, go through a whole analysis of operations and have some efficiencies built in, who would be in charge of that project?
It would be the department. It would be probably a grouping of Ken, Dave, myself, and probably the most important person would be Jackie Rowan, who's the right to know officer. for the township, because we're talking documents, and she's been with the township for 20 years in terms of administration and, you know, where things are, how they're kept, where they go, process. So, I mean, and Margaret as well, you know,
Well-
they're the ones touching those documents and where they're going and storing and
Yeah.
everything. So it would
But I
depend on the
think-
type of consultant you bring in and what type of information they would want. And, you know, police
Yeah.
records and,
Right.
you know, fire records, code
Well, I'll
code
tell you,
department records, things
you know,
like that.
regarding the police
So-
department, they have a fantastic system. I don't know if it's not Cody. Maybe it is Cody. Everything is digital. You know, if they have to print out a report, it's because someone's requested it, or they're sending it, or they're printing stuff out and giving us hard copies, or the chief emails me copies. But they set up an incident number, whatever they call it. They're all sequential, and everything is digital, and they have no paper files like they used to. And it's fantastic. And the chief sets up a number. It has a beginning and an end date because it's open and then it's investigated, it's closed, or it's a report and it's closed out. So that's a little different than the way we operate. But still, the idea that there's something there and it's backed up, it's in the cloud or whatever, and it's clean.
Well,
And
I'm also hearing different ideas. I mean, an office review is very different than just looking for something as far as a document. So we'll have some conversation, and I think while Jackie might be important if you're just looking at the documents, if you're looking at purchasing payroll and all of those type of things, it's going to be
That would be Ken. Yeah,
ball game.
exactly.
So
So we've got different people doing different roles, Colleen, and Brenda hit the nail on the head. I mean, you're going to have, depending on what you have, you're going to have different people involved who have the knowledge.
Right.
And that's,
Right.
you know,
Well,
most
thanks.
important.
I appreciate having a better understanding of roles there.
okay.
Sure.
So I guess we may have a little bit of sub homework to do, team, before next month. Cost cutting strategies. We touched on this briefly last month because while we've been looking at reducing revenues or looking at the restriction of revenues, of course, there are really two budgets that everyone's dealing with. So any discussion about cost cutting strategies yet at the administrative level moving into for 2021 or
Yeah.
even this year?
Yeah, Ken, Ned, and I have talked about it. We'll be going over things with the department heads as we develop their, you know, budget and their forecasting as well, trying to be a little tighter and look at how they can reduce expenditures for 21. And then other aspects related to some of the other things we talked about last time. That information will be reviewed, you know, as we get into things with the board on employees and things like that, benefits and positions and everything. That's kind of been the purview of the Board of Supervisors, just for the new people on the committee, and that's something, you know, the board and I will be discussing.
Well, it's within the purview of the Board of Supervisors, but it's a public entity. So you know, and I know about the volunteer handbook, but there's certainly ways, I mean, suggestions could be made and recommendations. So you're saying that you're not going to discuss, we could take this off of our list, and as the Ways and Means Committee, the Finance Committee, we're not going to discuss potential cost savings for 75.
Well, you can discuss it, but at the end, you know, those are things that will have to be reviewed with the board. You know, I mean, I don't necessarily know they're going to go open up the contract with the police, but that doesn't expire till 22. That would be something, you know, and, you know, benefits and changing things can, you know, get touchy with employees, and we want to make sure that, you know, we are respectful and, you know, working, and the board has an understanding if we're gonna, you know, start, you know, I don't want rumors and things like that. And I want to make sure that the board understands what approach we would take if changes were going to be made.
Well, like any, go ahead.
You go ahead first.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I understand what you said, Stephanie, and from my world, when you had a 15% to 13% reduction or whatever it is in revenues, or whatever that number was, the marching orders typically were, you have a budget, meet it, and find ways to meet it. Be creative. And there weren't any, well, we have to respect the people's sensitivities. I was at a point where I was in a layoff mode and I was told I had to lay off 2 people, okay, to meet budget restriction. So sometimes there are tough decisions that have to be made, and those tough decisions have to be made by the people at the top. And then they have to hand that data down or handle that data and pass it through the ranks. You know, I'll throw out something. If that means a wage freeze for everybody in the non-police area because you don't want to touch the contract, then that's a possibility. But
And it
you can't
Those are things that we'll
you can't let
discuss.
emotions rule what you can or cannot do. I'll give you another good example. I was given so much salary to give to a group of people, and I had to force rank the people. And half the people got raises, and the other half didn't because of the forced ranking. Again, they were tough decisions, but somebody had to make them. So
We've been there before, Joe. I mean, I've done.
I understand. I'm not saying you haven't. I'm just,
you know, and
reiterating
It's
what
been a
I.
long time, Stephanie. I mean, there have been increases every year that there's been a Ways and Means Committee. And
there were freezes, and there have been people who, you know, haven't seen salary increases, and those are all the things that Ken and I'll be looking at as we move forward into 2021.
So you're saying then that you
know.
are going to make some of those recommendations?
We'll have to see where we are and what kind of recommendations we may be making, but we'll do our due diligence, and, you know, that's the type of information that, you know, I want to make sure that the Board of Supervisors understands it. You know, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who'll make that final decision, you know? So whether,
you're absolutely correct, but it's also,
you know,
information that's public and not the individual PR, you know, but that people have the right to know under the Freedom of Information Act. Not evaluations, not personnel. So, I mean, that's one of the negative things about working in the public environment. And again, when 75% of the salary, or excuse me, 75% of the budget is on expenses and salaries. And it's not just that you would have to cut people's salaries. The benefits, what does everybody pay in Doylestown Township toward their health care?
yes,
What, 1%?
no, 5%.
Okay.
On the non-uniform side, the uniform side pays 1%.
Okay. Well, that, you know, that's.
But that
something.
opens the contract up.
I know,
you know.
Stephanie, and we actually talked about last time, several school districts and the teachers agreed to open the contract. And also it's a good time, an interesting time with what's going on in the country right now. So I would just encourage people to take advantage of change, because, you know, change has to start somewhere, and there's a lot of discussion going on and a lot of change trying to happen across the country. And I don't want to get into anything else like approach the previous Board of Supervisors meeting. Anything else from the Colleen, other members of the Ways and Means Committee regarding cost cutting strategies or expenditure reductions? Also remember, we're going to be paying more debt service very soon. And so that puts more pressure on the budget of trying to make that reduction.
Yeah, that was going to be my point, is I think that impacts 21, right? And going forward.
Actually, debt service for 21 should be less than in the plan for last year because we were borrowing a lot more money.
But it's still starts,
We had the community center total.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So the debt service, although it will happen presumably sometime, is stretched to the right.
Yeah.
No, agreed.
I feel like as a committee, we're absolutely supportive of staff and, you know, as much as possible, retaining status quo because our staff in our township does a great job. However, everyone has to be invested in accommodating what we see in a revenue decline because of circumstances that are beyond any of our control. And I think, you know, I think the Board of Supervisors understands that. I think our staff understands that. And we would be supportive of anything you guys need to really take a look at those things and do what we can to, I hate to say make everybody happy. You can't make everybody happy, but to be, you know, prudent as much as possible at the end of the game for the benefit of the taxpayer. That's our job.
And rolling in, and I agree, and thank you, Colleen, but as we step forward, looking at the next item on the agenda, there's still the pension.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's hanging over, and there may be conversations. I think, Bob, what was your suggestion? Maybe recommendation is too strong of a word at the last meeting.
Yeah, I mean, we made a pretty comprehensive recommendation
Yep.
in order to, you know, get the pension back in shape in 10 years. And I know the pension committee feels pretty strongly about that, so.
And in the conversations I've had with Ed Denton, I've told him that it is our intention to put the pension recommendation in the first draft. See what it says, see what happens.
Yeah.
And then I guess that comes back to,
I mean, I guess you guys didn't think much of the MMO calculations that got sent out, but one of the things you could conclude from that, if you just looked at say the next 5 years or the 5-year view that we would have in the budget, the impact of going from where we are to where the PAC recommendations put us is about $500,000 in real estate tax, which is not an insurmountable amount. So it seems to me, given that I mean, you get out the 10-year horizon, the numbers are much bigger. But if we focus on what we have to do in these next 5 years, there may be something more manageable that allows us to piece it together or most of it together.
Ed, to your point about the millage, you know, I agree. The one thing that would have softened the blow is as the deterioration was happening, the township at the same time was touting the fact that it hadn't raised its tax rate in X number of years. I believe it was stuck at 10.75, and maybe in hindsight, you know, prior boards should have recognized the fact that there was, or could have recognized, or didn't, or whatever the name is, didn't recognize that, and maybe put in 1/8 of a mil or whatever it was to kind of bridge that gap. So
yeah, we wish there had been a mini increase.
Yes.
Every so often.
Yep.
That would have just been routine. That would have been,
because what we're seeing now is historical flat line and now a hockey stick. And
no, I think that's
not quite that.
That's not quite that bad. But all I'm saying to you is that the debt service picture is somewhat lighter than what was in last year's plan, because the biggest, or at least half of the borrowing, is pushed off to the right. And so let's just see what we can do once we get the pieces there.
Yeah.
True.
We weren't that far difference. Don't forget, we've been making extra payments into the pensions for a couple, 3-4 years.
Yeah.
And we did 125 this year, so we were different by, what, $175,000 between what PAC recommended and what we also took the first step as recommended. Now, you've also increased it. You want to go 0.5% instead of 1/4%.
Yep.
So, okay, I mean, let's just see where it gets us.
Yeah.
And then frankly, the board's going to have to make some choices.
Yeah.
And that's true, but if one of the things that the Pension Advisory Committee suggested is that everybody make more of a contribution toward the pension. That could be one of the things that could be talked about. While that doesn't really decrease the township's expenses, but it could be a contribution toward a reduction, that is.
But it can't be done on the police side.
Yeah, the
I
police.
know, but
Yeah.
Well, that's where, frankly, most of the cost is.
Yeah, but if we continue to hound on a point about police negotiations, then maybe at some point when a contract comes up again for renegotiation, those thoughts are in the mind of the person who's doing the negotiating. Or there's some forethought to ask the committee for input prior to that negotiation. So these kind of things I think should always be on the table. They just, they're not discussed at the right time.
And
but
they've,
they're
I mean, they've been
frankly.
discussed with the with police in the past. Those are items, and
But-
when the back and
But
forth
it,
back to the Board of Supervisors and presented, this is their package, this is what we've offered, this is where we're at, this is,
Okay.
we could end
if
up.
I'm at A
That's
and
the board's
you're at B,
decision.
it's tough to get B to negotiate down. Okay, if you take the non-administration down or up, whatever that is, and you create a delta, now you have a bargaining chip. Okay, you don't
Somebody
have a
has to take
bargaining
the
chip
lead.
now.
It hasn't worked for us in the past.
Well,
Well, we're in a
Things-
different
and-
environment.
yeah. And
things
the
have changed. Things have
and the
changed.
the non-uniform will be the ones who end up, paying more into the pension. And I mean, I know it. They're going to end up paying more into the pension and more for insurance, for health insurance and everything like that. And we'll go to the, when we get before I've watched it. I've watched it over a number of, maybe I'm being cynical, and Bob and Brenda can appreciate it a little bit, we've taken it to the police and, we've taken those concepts. Ken's been a part of that for the couple things. And, it hasn't played well on that aspect. That's all I can say.
Well, Steph, I'm looking at it as that in 2021, the negotiations with the police will begin again, which is next
The
year.
contract's up in 22. So
Right,
it'll,
It's up in 22, so you would negotiate in 21.
Right.
And I think the Ways and Means,
so December, it'll be through 22 most likely.
okay, that
Yeah.
the Ways and Means needs to convince the 5 supervisors that something has to change. Either there's going to be a major tax increase at some point in time to fund the pension, or they have to start taking some actions. And if it's saying no to the police or getting, not giving the police everything they want, then maybe that has to happen once.
Yeah, I do think I think that does have to come from there. There has to be pressure put
Yeah.
on
And
that.
there's 5
And
supervisors. So.
I understand. And I mean, the board gets the updates and the information and its collective decision as to how it's going to be decided in the contracts.
Okay.
At the end of the day, the board votes on the contracts in public meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I mean, having sat at the negotiation table with PSEA people and everything, what comes out of the public meetings for the township is really nothing compared to what, I've done those presentations on benefits and salaries and how much it costs over the life of the contract for the individual
Yep.
people, whether it's a bus driver, and I've never seen that at a township meeting. I would find that quite interesting. But obviously, I think we've had some conversation. I think where the Ways and Means Committee is falling as far as recommendations. Pension is not going to go away. We certainly know that. We want to actually accelerate or the discount rate, minimizing it to get it in control or someplace that actually makes some sense instead of being at, what is it, 7.25 or 7.5%. And yet the debt, Ed, I appreciate the fact that you say it's not as bad as what we were imagining next year, but revenue isn't as going to be as good as what we were imagining.
There's a lot of
There's a
moving
bigger gap,
Yeah.
and that gap has to be addressed somehow. And it just can't all be done on the revenue side. And I truthfully don't think it's fair necessarily to push it off all on taxpayers by a tax increase. I think there needs to be an exercise of showing that expenditures can somehow be reduced. And I don't think it should be by cutting pension.
Well, and I do think if we go back to the idea of a consultant, I'll just, leave it at that. If you bring someone in that, we're not just talking about, document retention, but fully consulting on operations of you will find efficiencies, I think, in how things are operating administratively and with staff. And probably there will be some savings in the long run because a consultant will come in and you'll pay, part of what they'll say is they'll pay for themselves because of the efficiencies they'll find. So it may be something we want to explore pretty quickly.
Agreed.
Brenda, I'm wondering, we have a budget meeting, and this really, I guess, is directed at Stephanie or Ed on September the 10th. When will we be getting the information on what's included for that meeting? So when will we know what's in that budget?
I think it's
Give it a
September
week ahead of
15th.
time, or?
I think
The
it's the
15th.
I think
15th,
it's
2
the
o'clock.
15th, sorry.
15th, 2 o'clock.
meeting was the 15th.
15th.
15 to 3 o'clock.
2 o'clock?
I thought Steph said 3.
Three?
Stephanie said
3.
Sorry.
Okay, the 15th. The question
Let me
is
double
saying,
Same question, different date. Gave us time to think about it, though. Given where we normally are, I would say we'll be working hard to get it to you by that Friday before.
If not, a little earlier in the week.
If we can do it earlier, we'll do it earlier, but things are really smoking at that point.
Yeah.
okay. Good deal.
Okay. Also, I think next month then, based on what I'm understanding from EdDen Pension Advisory Committee folks, I think that Ed wants to come back, or there's going to be discussion at next month's Ways and Means Committee meeting about pension. Again, is that correct? I think there's going to be a discussion at the Pension Committee meeting in August. Do I have that correctly?
Yeah, I think Ed wants to come back with an update or
Mhm.
whatever discussion.
So,
Ed Benton, right?
Ed
yes,
Denton.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
I don't
not
think-
Ed E, Ed D.
Ed D.
Okay, and we've,
That meeting's, we have a meeting in September, August 10th. Let me look again.
no,
Second.
that's Monday, August
Yeah.
10th.
It's the second Monday,
Yeah,
Yes,
4:30.
Yep.
And then we'll plan on August the 26th to discuss pension again at this meeting, correct? Okay,
I'd have to go back to my notes, to be honest, but it sounds about right.
all right. And we've already covered, I think, the September meeting with the Board of Supervisors several times as to the time and the day. Anything else? Group? Nothing. Nope.
motion to adjourn?
There you go, Mr. Shaw.
Second.
Is there a second, Joe?
Second. See you, gang.
All right.
Take care
All
of
right.
yourself. Everybody take care.
Stay well.
Yeah, stay